Do you ever catch a whiff of wood smoke on a damp autumn evening and feel a memory stir like an old phonograph needle finding its favorite groove? My name is Margaret N. Collins. Folks just call me Miss Maggie. And on God's good earth, child, I turned 65 last spring, though the lamplight over my quilt frame keeps insisting I've been here a spell longer. Tonight the wind pushed that smoke through the crack beneath my kitchen door, and with it came the crisp snap of a newspaper sheet catching flame, the same sharp note that once split my life clean in two. I set my teacup down, listened to the crickets tuning up for their twilight symphony, and knew I wouldn't be sleeping till sunrise. Now sugar, right quick at this 20-second beat. Darlin', tap that thumbs up and leave a note, would ya? Where was I? Yes, the smoke. It pulls me back to the fall of 2003, up on the Tennessee Ridge, where the maples blush crimson and the evenings taste of cider. That was the night Jacob's stove finally betrayed him, the night I stepped across a burning threshold to tug my stepfather, my tormentor, out of his own private hell. Funny how one moment can braid together the past you survived and the future you never looked for. You see, when the leaves turn and the air grows sharp enough to bite, my mind walks two roads at once. One is the gravel drive that led to Mama's clapboard house in the 1950s, where every plank smelled of damp tobacco, axle grease, and unsaid things. The other is a dirt lane curling toward that same house half a century later, shingles sagging, windows black as pitcher soot, the whole place glowing like a forge, because Jacob never did patch a cracked flue. The memory weighing on me tonight is less about fire and more about choice, the kind that sneaks up quiet, taps your shoulder and asks whether you're the person your hurt tried to shape or the person your heart still hopes you can be. All my life I carried Jacob's silence like a stone in my apron pocket, no bruises to show the neighbors, just that hush that grows teeth and chews up little girls' laughter. I thought I'd buried that chapter when I finally boarded the midnight Greyhound out of these hills at 18, wedding band warm in my palm and Chattanooga lights winking me forward. But smoke has a way of finding the cracks. The instant I smelled newspaper burning, I wasn't a librarian in sensible shoes anymore. I was that skinny child again, flinching at the creak of boot leather on the porch. And yet, here's the puzzle that keeps rattling. When I heard Jacob coughing inside those flames, I moved. No grand sermon, no angel chorus, just my own two hands shoving the door and my mind muttering, he's still human. Maybe I needed to prove it to myself as much as to him. What troubles me tonight, the itch beneath my skin, is wondering whether hauling him out was mercy or a last attempt to unlatch the cage he built inside me. I reckon that's why I'm talking to you now, stranger friend, because the story isn't finished until it's told, and maybe once the telling's done I'll finally set it down. So pour yourself a cup, settle that blanket across your knees, and walk with me through 10 turns of the calendar. Somewhere between a girl's first fright and a woman's last forgiveness, you might find a sliver of your own reflection dancing in the firelight. Well now, slide yourself closer to the hearth of my memory, sugar, and let me unroll the quilt of days when I was little Maggie Hale, no bigger than a milking stool, freckles scattered like cinnamon on oatmeal, chasing June bugs along a gravel lane that curled like a fiddle tune through the hollers of eastern Tennessee, spring of 1953. Home sat, halfway up a rich folks nicknamed Sparrow's Crown, a clapboard house the color of sweet cream, roof tin chiming whenever rain tapped its steady rhythm, chimney smoke curling like a lazy question mark into the blue. Life on Sparrow's Crown moved by porch swing clockwork. Come summertime the mountains heaved with the scent of wild honeysuckle, and on Saturday nights our battery radio crackled with the Grand Ole Opry while Mama and I shucked corn beneath lightning bug lanterns, swearing each ear held more gold than Fort Knox. Dawn, rooster crow, coffee on the wood stove, pump handle squeaking. Noon, the school bell, children tumbling out like marbles, knees grass-stained. Supper, Mama humming in a sweet by and by, me snapping beans while the sky blushed lavender. Nights, kerosene lamp glow, whip-poor-will choruses, the soft click of Mama's needles. If a car crawled the driveway, we knew by the dust plume 5 minutes before it arrived. Folks might say nothing ever happened up there, but every breeze carried gossip, every creek bend whispered hello, and I considered myself queen of the whole green county. I was 6 that autumn when Mama married Jacob Collins, a mechanic whose palms smelled of axle grease and unspoken things. He set his toolbox by the door, offered me a piece of horehound candy, and spoke so soft he near vanished into the wallpaper. Town gossip swore you could trust a quiet man. Even at 6 my belly knew some hushes have teeth. Still, I pressed that candy against the gap in my front teeth and told myself, every story needs a daddy. Sundays we bounced in Jacob's rusty pickup past dogwood trees to clap along with Reverend Jenkins, while Mama's alto floated sweet as sorghum. I can still see myself on that pew, swinging patent leather shoes that were mostly cardboard, tracing sunbeams through stained glass, certain heaven itself was listening. When the sermon turned to mercy, I printed it in my primer. Mercy means folks come back. Child logic, simple as pie. Dreams? Lord, I had a basket full. I aimed to read every book in the county library and someday stand on a Nashville stage singing ballads that could hush a barroom. Each morning I skipped stones across the frog pond, telling the ripples, when I'm big I'll ride the train clear to Chattanooga and send Mama postcards that smell of perfume. I believed the world opened like a curtain if you loved it hard enough. Yet even in that sweet tea season, shadows stretched. Sometimes I caught Jacob's gaze lingering on the screen door. Sometimes Mama's song dipped minor when his boots thudded the porch. But a child stacks doubt like dominoes, hoping they never fall. I tucked questions beneath my pillow and whispered to my stuffed rabbit, people always choose kind. Back then, I still believed storms could be bargained with, that kindness was the strongest fence a girl could build. So understand, friend, when smoke curls under my kitchen door these nights and the air tastes of old newspaper, it lifts more than a single memory. It raises the whole porch, the pond, the whip-poor wells, and that starry-eyed girl who thought everybody's heart would find its way home eventually. I can still taste that first snowfall of '56, cold as peppermint bark, and for a flicker of precious years, Sparrow's crown was all sunrise, all tender, all mine, and I wore hope like a ribbon in my hair. Funny how a single knock on a screen door can spin the whole axis of a young girl's world. It was July of '57, heat shimmering over Sparrow's crown like the hum off Mama's iron skillet, when the creak of our porch announced a visitor who'd slip a brand new thread through the fabric of my life. I was 10, skin sun-warmed, knees scabbed from blackberry brambles, standing sentry beside the butter churn while cicadas drummed their steady cadence. Mama wiped her palms on her apron and opened that door, and there she stood, and Edna Mae Turner, though we'd never met her face to face. She was 30-something, younger than Mama by a hair, willow slim yet sturdy as a fence post, with raven hair pinned in a tidy roll and a lavender scent that cut through the barnyard musk like Sunday morning hymns. She carried a tin lunch pail in one hand and a bundle wrapped in calico under the other, and when her eyes, a storm-colored blue, the exact hue of my own, landed on me, I swear something inside my chest did a quick step like the first high note of a fiddle tune. Mama introduced her with a soft, almost quivery smile, explaining Edna would be staying a spell to help with canning season since Papa Jacob's garage kept him away till after dark. Edna's voice gentle, but edged with the kind of mischief that invites fireflies to dance, tumbled out warm hellos and compliments on my braid. Then she pressed that calico bundle into my arms. Inside lay a lined composition book, pristine save for a ribbon bookmark and a fountain pen with a marbled blue barrel. She said every mountain girl deserved a pocket to keep her thoughts, and if I listened close, the paper itself would answer back. Child, nobody had ever handed me something so fine. That night, while Mama and Edna clattered jars in the kitchen and Jacob Studebaker coughed on the far road, I cracked open that notebook, brushing fingertips over the first page like it was silk. Words slid out shy, then brave, about whippoorwills and Mama's lullaby, and the queer hush that settled whenever Jacob crossed the threshold. I couldn't name it fear, not yet, but the pen seemed to know its letters in the dark. Within a week Edna had folded herself into our rhythms, up before dawn slicing cling peaches, humming mountain ballads fresh and bright. Evenings she taught me to skip-stitch my name, said a girl who knows her own name never gets lost for long. Mama watched from the doorway, cheeks pink with pride, though some nights I caught her tucking away a sigh that wilted her shoulders like sun-tired asters. Jacob, for his part, regarded Edna the way a distant storm as a picnic, polite, but sparing, as if her laughter scuffed the polished floor he kept beneath Mama's feet. Yet every time Edna winked at me over the dinner table, a conspiratorial spark lit up the shadows. The pivotal flash arrived 2 Saturdays later at the county fair. Jacob had taken the truck into town, leaving us to wander rows of ribbon pies and hand-painted quilts. At the Tilt-A-Whirl, a farm boy named Henry Todd offered me a penny peach ice cone, and when our eyes met, mercy, my pulse banged like church bells. I'd never felt anything so electric. But just as Henry tipped his cap and ambled off, Jacob Studebaker screeched nearby. He stepped out, gaze landing first on Edna, then on me holding that half-melted cone. His jaw tightened. No words, just that iron silence. In that instant I understood a rule had been broken, though I hadn't known it existed. My notebook trembled in my pocket, begging me to write the way a locked door begs for a key. Later, back home, Jacob's boots thumped the porch while thunder rolled beyond the ridge. Mama hustled me to bed, Edna standing sentinel in the hallway, her hand brushing mine quick, but fierce, as though passing a secret torch. Courage, little bird. That single touch set my heart racing, not from fear, but from a budding certainty that my life owned more chapters than the ones Jacob intended to write. I could not have told you why the air crackled so, or why Edna's presence felt both balm and riddle, yet I knew, the way you know lightning's coming before the clouds split, that my world had tilted. From that day forward the very map of Sparrow's Crown bore an invisible legend, "Here be crossroads." And though I was only 10, freckles and all, something deep down whispered that every story worth telling rides on the hinge of one unexpected hello. The summer's glow slipped behind Sparrow's Crown quicker than I expected that year, and with the first nip of September the wheel of ordinary life came loose from its axle, rattling down the ridge before any of us could chase it. School bells still rang. Hens still scattered scratch near the coop, yet the air around our clapboard house felt tight as a jar lid screwed on wrong. Jacob started coming home earlier, grease-streaked coveralls hanging stiff on his frame, eyes flicking from Mama's face to Edna's calm smile, and finally landing on me linger, measure, move on, like a carpenter tapping studs behind plaster. One gray Tuesday he stood in the doorway, thumb against his lower lip, and announced in that steady hush of his that extra mouths meant extra chores. Edna's visit, he said, had run its course. The silence that followed weighed more than words. I watched Mama's knuckles blanch around a dish towel, Edna's lashes flutter once, twice, then still. That evening Edna packed slowly, folding gingham with the care of a woman sealing memories in cedar. She pressed the marbled fountain pen into my palm, whispering, "Keep writing." But the notebook stayed on my pillow like a live coal I dared not touch because Jacob's shadow filled the hallway. By dawn her suitcase was gone and the truck growled down the holler, rooster crow trying and failing to drown its echo. Loss arrived quiet, but its teeth found every corner. I burned peach preserves our first Saturday without her, then snapped at Mama when the syrup scorched. Guilt squatted in my chest, heavy as a toad, because I knew Mama's own sorrow was stitched to mine. Yet we walked separate orbits around Jacob's silence. A week later the teacher, Miss Abernathy, called me to her desk after arithmetic. She'd read the scratch of my pencil and seen the tremor in my sums, asked gentle questions about how things were at home. I shrugged off concern, cheeks hot, ashamed that worry showed like dirt beneath fingernails, but the notion that an adult might peer behind our curtains filled me with equal parts relief and dread. I clutched my book bag so tight the straps left welts. That very night Jacob discovered the notebook. How, I still wonder. Maybe the loose floorboard creaked when I knelt to hide it. Maybe the universe itself tipped him off. He said nothing, simply placed it on the kitchen table beside a chipped mug of cold chicory, the pen laid parallel like a carpenter's square. He asked if I'd rather churn butter than scribble little stories, voice low but trembling the spoons. When I could not answer, he slid the notebook toward me so slow my breath caught, then ordered me to read aloud the first page. My tongue felt wooden, yet I read, "Whip poor Wills, hushes with teeth, hope like a yellow ribbon," each word ringing traitorous under the oil lamp. Tears blurred the ink, but Jacob showed no triumph, only a frown deep as a plow furrow. He said writing filled heads with nonsense, that girls were made for honest work, and mercy help me. I half believed him, because doubt sprouted fast when planted in fear-soaked soil. Mama stood at the sink, shoulders shaking quiet, refusing to turn. I wished she'd spin around, slam her wet hands down, declare my sentences sacred, but her silence was a wall I couldn't scale. That night I lay awake smelling coal smoke, hearing every board groan, wrestling a knot of anger and shame larger than my 10-year-old ribs. I wanted to scream that stories were work, that words could build bridges, but dread cinched my throat. At sunrise Jacob left early, toolbox clanking, and Mama crept in, smoothing my braid, saying, "Only dear chores, baby," voice thinned by grief she wouldn't name. My dilemma hardened. Keep the peace by letting my voice wither, or keep writing and risk fires I could not yet imagine. No one could choose for me, yet I felt utterly alone, save for a fountain pen hidden now inside my boot, tapping my ankle like a secret heartbeat, reminding me the hardest battles are the quiet ones, fought beneath skin where grown-ups never look. Child, there comes a night in every woman's life when the ordinary breaks in half like a brittle wishbone, and for me that night arrived in November of '61, sky the color of pewter, wind howling through the chestnut trees like a church choir gone wrong. I was 16, Mama lay fever-tossed upstairs, and Jacob, a knot of restlessness and kerosene, paced the parlor while the old Seth Thomas mantled clock ticked itself toward ruin. Then, without warning, the minute hand shuddered at 11:32, and I swear time simply quit, the way a faithful hound sometimes drops mid-stride, and everything hung in a hush so thick it tasted of pennies. Jacob's shadow stretched across the floorboards, swallowed the coal stove's glow, and reached the notebook I'd rescued after his last outburst, the one Edna told me to guard like my own pulse. He lifted it slow, thumbed the pages, eyes narrowing on the fresh ink where I'd pleaded silently for Mama to wake, for fear to loosen its grip. For some wrote out of Sparrow's Crown words that must have sounded like rebellion to a man who needed silence the way a moth craves darkness. In that frozen instant, I felt the air shake, not with sound, but with the possibility of sound. A storm holding its breath. Jacob's jaw clenched, and he stepped toward the stove, notebook dangling, a single ember popping inside the grate like distant musket fire, and my heart kicked so hard I thought ribs would crack. I opened my mouth, but no voice came, only the muffled roar of blood. Then Mama's weakened call drifted from upstairs. Maggie, sugar, soft as a flower petal yet sharp enough to slice the spell. I bolted past Jacob, skirts brushing his leg, and raced to her bedroom, where kerosene lamplight painted her cheeks the color of chalk. Her eyes, glossy with fever, found mine, and for a heartbeat she looked 6 years old again, a child asking permission to rest. I pressed a cool cloth to her brow, whispering every hymn I knew while downstairs. The stove door clanged and a whoosh of flame devoured paper and ink and girlhood dreams. The smell of burning linen and newsprint curled up the stairwell, and with it rose an understanding as clear as the frost on the windowpane. I could stay and let my spirit smolder to ash, or I could leave and carry Mama's song forward. At dawn she slipped away, breath a final thread that snapped without fuss, and the clock downstairs sputtered back to life, its tick now a taunt. I walked behind the wagon, bearing her pine box to Willow Grove, Jacob silent at the reins. Mountains crouched like gray-haired elders judging the living. When the last clod of dirt thudded, I laid a sprig of wintergreen on the mound and felt something inside me straighten, like a sapling bending toward light. That evening Jacob cracked the kitchen door, muttered we'd make do, but I saw the empty space where my notebook had burned and knew making do meant shrinking to fit his quiet forever, so I slipped Edna's fountain pen into my boot, packed Mama's Sunday dress, and my one photograph of her singing in the choir, and under a moon thin as a promise, I trudged to the highway, thumb out, lungs shaking but alive. The Greyhound roared up blue and silver, driver hollering, Chattanooga, Knoxville, points west, and when those doors hissed open I stepped inside. Every mile of blacktop that followed driven by the moment a clock halted and a notebook burned, loss carving a doorway, grief shoving me through, and the girl who once believed kindness was the strongest fence, discovering that sometimes the only way to honor love is to run for daylight before the flames reach your feet. Child, when that midnight Greyhound hissed to a stop in Chattanooga, I felt more passenger than owner of my own bones, as if the bus had shaken Sparrow's crown clean out of me and left rattling space behind. A narrow room above Mrs. Hopkins's dress shop became my harbor, mattress thin as pie crust, window trembling each time a freight train moaned across the river. By day I hemmed strangers' skirts, by night I stitched shut the ragged holes memory kept tearing open, living on crackers and the promise that staying awake felt safer than dreaming. Sundays I hid on the last pew at First Methodist, breathing hymns instead of singing them, Mama's alto haunting the rafters. Faith didn't vanish, it curled small, like a wounded fawn beneath thorn brush. I prayed quiet, trusting only that a moving river doesn't freeze. Summer browned into fall, and the public library's cool aisles welcomed me like shade. Miss Fletcher found me copying poems, offered a shelving job, and ink, paper, possibilities seeped back into my bloodstream. Every title I filed felt like a stepping stone across deep water, proof that stories survive ashes. Even so, certain sounds, metal slamming, paper crumpling, yanked me straight to that burning kitchen. I dated polite fellows, yet the first hard glance sent me retreating behind practiced smiles. Caution kept me lonely but alive, and in loneliness I learned the difference between broken and open. One bleeds, the other breathes. Christmas '65 brought William Collins, no kin to Jacob, asking about folks on books. His patience wrapped around me like a quilt. 2 winters later, he slid a plain gold band on my hand and vowed never to raise a finger except to point out constellations. I believed him slowly, measuring his promises by seasons, not seconds, until trust felt like warm bread again. Motherhood followed with gentle chaos, tiny socks on radiators, milk-sweet laughter echoing off plaster. Yet, even among that blessing, there were midnights when William's steady breath couldn't drown the hiss of phantom flames. I'd slip to the kitchen, run cool water over my wrists, and wait for heart and past to settle. Dawn would find me shelving books on courage while still tasting metal fear, learning to let contradictions coexist, joy beside sorrow, growth beside scar. Healing, I discovered, is dusk not dawn, dim, gradual, noticed only when you glance back and see the shadows shifted. I still jumped at furnace pups, still steered clear of burning newsprint, yet I was writing again. Church newsletter blurbs, bedtime fables for our babies, long letters to Edna I never mailed. My faith in people returned mosaic, edges showing but stronger where the cracks had been. Somewhere between library stacks and lullabies, I promised the frightened girl inside me she would always have a seat at my table, so neither of us would face dark rooms alone. Years marched on, and the children soon stood taller than the pencil marks on the pantry door. When they left for college, the house echoed, a hush unlike Sparrow's crown, because this time it was chosen, not forced. I paused in their rooms, breathed detergent and paper, and noticed the terror that once ruled my lungs now only whispered. Evenings I poured coffee at a crisis center for girls carrying suitcases of silence. I couldn't solve everything, but naming their pain knitted strength into both of us. Giving hope away didn't erase loneliness, it set a lantern inside it. And in that gentle glow, finally, I could rest without keeping one foot on the floor, ready for tomorrow's quiet. Child, hope tiptoes in same as dawn, quiet, pale, almost shy of its own brightness, and for me it came one breezy April evening in 2001, long after the nest was empty and the hush of our Chattanooga bungalow sounded polite rather than lonesome. I was shelving a consignment of large print mysteries when the reference desk phone jangled like a church bell, and on the line spilled my cousin Ruthie, breathless from laughter and grief all tangled. Maggie girl, guess who's dwindlin' away up on Sparrow's crown. For a moment I tasted rust on my tongue because I hadn't let Jacob's name pass my lips in decades, but there it was, hovering like a moth in porch light. Ruthie rambled about his lungs gone bad, the old house sagging, no kin close enough or willing enough to do more than drop casserole at the stoop. She confessed she'd tried to sit with him once yet couldn't stomach his wheeze or the dead silence between coughs. When the line clicked dead, I stood halfway between stacks A and B, palms sweating ink onto a crisp dust jacket, and felt a peculiar tug. Not pity exactly, more a stubborn flicker saying, you could go up that mountain as the woman you've become, not the child you fled. All night, I rocked beside William's snoring, asking the ceiling fan if closure was myth or medicine. By dawn the answer rose on the smell of percolating coffee. Some stories heal only when heard to their last punctuation. So I phoned Ruthie back, arranged a weekend visit, and spent the next 12 days packing bravery into small acts, sorting first aid supplies, baking cinnamon bread sturdy enough for steep hills, rereading every letter I'd written but never sent to Edna. At the crisis center I whispered to the girls, I'm fixin' to face my own old ghost, pray I remember which end of courage goes first. And they cheered soft as sparrows, slipping friendship bracelets onto my wrist for luck. The evening before I left, our grown son Daniel called to say his little girl had spelled grandma all by herself. The news landed like a seed in fresh soil, reminding me the past can't claim tomorrow's joy unless we hand over the deed. Saturday sun shot gold spears through dogwood petals as Willie unloaded the trunk. He squeezed my shoulders, said, "You come home whole, Maggie, nothing less, and I knew love can't walk another's reckoning, but it sure can light the porch for your return." For hours later the blue ridge rose on the horizon, familiar yet shrunken, as if distance had trimmed its menace. My lungs tightened anyway, that old coal smoke memory scratching the door, yet each mile marker I passed felt like another stitch binding fear to purpose. I pulled off the highway for gas, caught my reflection in the station window, silver hair sweeping my collar, crisis center bracelet winking pink and purple, eyes steadier than that trembling farm girl of 61, and I almost smiled. Right there beside diesel pumps and stacks of firewood I sensed a gentle stirring, the way a sapling quivers just before budding. Maybe this homecoming wasn't solely about Jacob. Maybe it was about proving to the tender parts of myself that we could walk back into any room we once fled and stand tall without burning. By the time the state route narrowed to gravel and the first whiff of mountain laurel wrapped the car, cautious optimism settled like a shawl across my shoulders. Heartbreak might still lurk at the ridge's crown, but I was arriving older, wiser, armed with cinnamon bread and the fierce knowledge that my voice, quiet, yes, but sturdy now, was coming too. In that moment the word second chance stopped meaning redemption for him and started meaning restoration for me. And child, let me tell you, that realization hummed sweeter than any hymn I'd ever shelved. Child, the night Jacob's wheezy breathing settled into its last ragged hush, and the rescue sirens faded down the mountain road. I stood alone on that sagging porch beneath a sky stitched thick with October stars and felt the years rearrange themselves inside me like books finally finding their rightful shelf. My hands were black soot from dragging him clear of the flames, my lungs raw with smoke and unshed words, yet under all that bruise of memory stirred a quiet knowing, no ember of his past cruelty could scorch the woman I had labored 6 decades to become. I carried a single relic of Sparrow's crown, a corroded brass button from Mama's Sunday dress, found earlier that evening in a cracked dresser drawer, and I rolled it now between thumb and forefinger the way a preacher turns prayer beads. All the while the old house smoldered, beams collapsing in size, and it struck me that the blaze had done what my fear never dared. It opened the walls, spilled every hidden room to the night air, left nothing for shadows to clutch. With dawn still a rumor, I walked to the edge of the ridge where dogwood leaves fluttered silver in moonlight, and I spoke aloud for no ears but the owls. Jacob Collins, I release what you planted, your hush, your shame, your narrow measure of a girl's worth, and I claim my own stretch of sky. My voice quavered only once, then steadied, firm as an oak root. I pressed Mama's button into the cool earth at my feet, symbol enough of all I could not bury before, and patted soil over it like tucking in a child for peaceful sleep. In that small motion I felt the latch of an iron gate lift. The clamor inside my ribs eased, and tears fell honest, not frantic, washing cinders from my cheeks. When sunrise finally brushed the horizon pink, I turned from the ruins without gathering a single keepsake. The road down mountain glittered with frost, and each step away felt like breathing fresh pages into a once-burned notebook. I made 2 promises as gravel crunched under sensible heels. First, never again to confuse endurance with silence. Second, to tell my story end to end so even the bruised parts could bathe in daylight. Back in Chattanooga, I invited Daniel's little girl to the library after closing, spread blank journals across a quiet table, and watched her eyes widen at the prospect of spilling her own bright secrets onto paper, seed of a legacy far kinder than the one I inherited. That evening, while she doodled unicorns, I opened a fresh volume myself, wrote in deliberate script, October 18th, 2003, I chose to live forward, and felt the line stitched shut a wound that had gaped since 61. The decision did not erase scars, nothing holy about pretending away ashes, but it rearranged them into a map that points toward tomorrow instead of yesterday. Now each time wood smoke curls under my kitchen door, I lift my chin, sip tea sweet with cinnamon, and whisper, I carried the fire and did not burn. And child, that simple truth spoken without tremor is the purest freedom I know. Child, when I set my teacup down these evenings and watch the steam rise slow as creek fog, I can almost hear that old mountain clock pause for my blessing before it ticks again, and that, sugar, is the small miracle I never expected. The past no longer bosses the present. I once believed survival was a private errand, like tucking wartime sugar into the flour sack, quiet work so nobody felt obliged to help and nobody learned how thin your rations were. But years of listening to other women's midnight confessions at the crisis center taught me the sly truth. Pain kept secret just keeps its strength, while pain spoken out loud has to share the load with every ear that hears it. Looking back, I see two photographs laid side by side. In the first, little Maggie stands on Sparrow's crown, notebook pressed to her chest, eyes wide as pie plates, praying kindness will be enough to tame the hush in Jacob's boots. In the second, gray-haired Miss Maggie sits at a library table lit by afternoon sun, grandbaby scribbling rainbows beside her, and her eyes are still wide, but with wonder, not fear, because she has finally accepted that kindness must sometimes start at home, inside the borders of your own good skin. The distance between those pictures looks short on paper, yet it took 6 decades and a house fire to walk it. What did I learn along the way? First, that forgiveness is not a pardon slip you hand to the person who hurt you. It is a key you tuck in your own pocket so you can step outside the locked room they left you in. Second, that courage rarely shows up with a trumpet blast. Most days it's a shaky exhale followed by one honest sentence. Third, that grief will pitch camp in your yard from time to time, but you get to choose whether it sleeps on the porch swing or crawls into your bed. And last, that a story, any story, lives twice. Once when it happens and again when you decide what to do with it. I chose to weave mine into a rope strong enough to pull other folks across their own rushing dark, because a rope, unlike a chain, leaves room to breathe. So, if your heart is still waiting for someone else's apology, or the perfect moment, or a sign written in fireworks, let an old mountain woman save you some days. There is no perfect moment, and fireworks burn out quick. The soft lamp of today is all you need to start. Write the letter. Make the call. Burn the bridge if it only leads back to hurt. And when that stubborn inner clock delays, tap its face and remind it who owns the time. My life did not turn out tidy. Ashes still drift in odd corners, and some nights I wake at 11:32, hand over my pulse, just to prove it's steady. But the porch I sit on now is mine, the stories are mine, and the silence obeys me, not the other way around. So, if you're sitting there tonight with a pocket full of unsent letters or a dream that rattles louder than the chains on its door, maybe pour yourself a cup, breathe in that steam, and ask, what would happen if I quit waiting for the clock to grant permission and simply gave it mine? The porch lamp is on, friend. Come tell your story before the tea gets cold. Well now, sugar, if you've lingered with me this long, I reckon your tea is stone cold and the porch lamp outside your screen door is throwing moth shadows on the wall. But before we both shuffle off to our separate midnights, I want to place the story's last ember right in your open palm. Feel that hush of warmth, hear the faint crackle? That isn't just yesterday bragging. It's proof that a tale kindled on a smoky Tennessee ridge can keep burning clear into whatever tomorrow you're facing. All my rambling about notebooks and fire and hushes with teeth was never meant to set Jacob's memory on trial. He's ash on the wind now, answerable to a judge far wiser than I. No, child, it's meant to remind you that the clock in your chest is winding down the same minutes mine once squandered on fear and mercy. Those minutes are too precious for anyone hurt to keep hostage. I walked back up Sparrow's Crown convinced I was going there to finish something, but the joke was on me. I went so something better could finally begin. Saving the man who broke me did not crown me saint, and it surely didn't stamp pardon on his ledger. It simply showed me where my power lay the whole time, in choosing what kind of woman would step through the smoke and what kind would step back out. Since that dawn, I've measured my days and breaths taken free, not in apologies never spoken. I hope when you close this tab and the silence settles, you hear your own heartbeat and realize it's not asking for permission, only direction. Maybe you're sitting there with a door half ajar in your own heart, a place you haven't dared step back into because you're scared of what still smolders inside. Let me tell you, the boards might creak, the sit might sting your eyes, but on the other side of that threshold lives air clean enough to breathe deep again. All you have to carry is honesty, and that fits light as a pocket handkerchief. So here's my parting question, gentle but pointed as a quilting needle. If the person who wounded you most were the one gasping for help tonight, would you step through the flames? And more importantly, why? Sit with that a spell, darlin'. Let it unsettle you enough to type a few words below, because the moment you name your truth, the lock on that old room begins to rust away. And if you find yourself wondering whether real love, the kind sown from grit and grace, is obliged to circle back when the world catches fire, well, I'm still wrestling that riddle myself. Some evenings when the chimney sighs just so, I fancy I hear Mama's alto drifting down the flue, and other times I swear the wind carries a cough that sounds like Jacob remembering my name. Maybe it's only memory playing possum, maybe it's something tenderer we don't yet have words for. Either way, the porch light of possibility stays on. Now tuck this ember someplace safe, click that little heart if it warmed you, and leave your answer where we can all draw near its glow. Until our paths cross again, may your stories burn bright enough to guide you, but never so wild they blind you, and may the quiet you keep be the quiet you chose. Good night, friend. Don't let the tea grow cold twice.